Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's installment of Terrifying Trios. Our theme this time is water, because you never know what's lurking in the depths. Content warning. The following movies and book contain scenes of graphic violence, including death by sea and or river monster attack, destruction caused by natural disasters, monsters, blood loss, body horror and or disfiguration, the threat of violence against children, as well as child death, and more. Viewer and reader discretion is advised. And as always, spoilers ahead. Our first film this month is The Host, written and directed by Oscar winner Bong Joon-ho. This film begins in the year 2000 with a large quantity of formaldehyde being improperly disposed of at a U.S. Army base in South Korea. And when I say improperly disposed of, I mean an American scientist orders his Korean assistant to simply dump it down a drain that leads to the river. Later, something is spotted, moving beneath the water. Time passes, and we meet the Park family in 2006. Park Gang-doo, who isn't the sharpest fellow, works for his father at the family's snack bar business, and wishes to provide a good life for his daughter, Hyun-seo. Like many teens, she's a bit embarrassed by her family, especially her father and his unfortunately dyed hair. When a massive creature appears in the Han River, not far from the Park snack bar, at first, onlookers are amazed. Amazement quickly turns to terror when the river monster begins grabbing people with its giant tentacles. Park Gang-doo flees with Hyun-seo, but as they run with a crowd trying to escape the monster, her hand slips out of his, and she is snatched up by the creature. Heartbroken, Gang-doo and his father, Hee-bong, grieve Hyun-seo's death at a public memorial, along with Gang-doo's sister, Nam-ju, who's famous for her skill at archery, having medaled at a national competition, and his brother, Nam-il, whose success in college has nonetheless been followed up by unemployment. However, at the memorial service, officials announced that those present at the monster's attack on the riverbank will have to quarantine. Supposedly, it's the host of a deadly virus, and the government, as well as the USFK, the United States Forces Korea, don't want the contagion to spread. Under normal circumstances, the Park family would follow this edict. After all, it seems to be for the sake of public health. But then Gang-doo gets a call from Hyun-seo. She's still alive, and though she can climb into a drain pipe in the concrete structure where the monster lives, and where its tentacles can't reach her, she needs help to escape. Her phone dies before she can say anything more. The Park family, upon receiving no help from officials, who don't seem to believe Gang-doo's story about his daughter still being alive, agree that they're going to have to rescue Hyun-seo on their own. After surreptitiously leaving the hospital, they're able to buy weapons and other items they might need for the rescue. This is done with the help of men involved in organized crime, but of course, now that they're breaking quarantine, the family has accepted that what they do now will be done outside the bounds of legality. Around this time, two unhoused brothers are consumed by the monster. It returns to its home, and Hyun-seo helps the younger brother, Se-ju, hide with her in the drainpipe. Both brothers were regurgitated, presumably so the monster could eat them later, but the older brother was dead upon arrival. When the monster next ventures outside, the Park family finds it and attempts to kill it. However, bullets seem to have no effect, and Hee-bong is killed in the fight. Though his brother and sister manage to escape, Gang-doo is taken by the army. It turns out there's a bounty on the Park family. Nam-il learns this from a friend, who tries to turn him in, but before he can be captured, Nam-il learns that Hyun-seo is probably at a bridge spanning the Han River. There are plans in place to try and exterminate the monster there, in its makeshift den. When Gang-doo is transported to a medical facility, he learns that they plan to lobotomize him. This will make certain that he can't go public with the truth about the fact that there is no virus. It's just a story made up to distract the public from the creature's true origin, presumably the formaldehyde dumped in the river years before. However, Gang-doo takes a nurse hostage and escapes, desperate to save his daughter. By this time, it's been announced by the South Korean government and USFK that a poison called Agent Yellow will be used to try and kill the river monster. Hyun-seo, along with Se-ju, try to escape the monster's den by tying clothes into a rope, but they're swallowed by the creature instead. Gang-doo manages to make it to the place where the poison will be released. It's relatively easy to find, since people are protesting and there's plenty of news coverage. He reunites with Nam-ju and actually sees the monster with Hyun-seo's arm sticking out of its mouth. It's this point that the monster attacks the crowd of people, only to be stunned by the release of Agent Yellow. Gangdu finds that Hyunseo is dead, but Seju, who was swallowed with her, is clinging to life. Realizing that his daughter died helping to save someone, he's clearly stricken by grief, but also determined to save Seju, so his daughter's sacrifice won't be in vain. Meanwhile, Nam-il and Namju, along with an unhoused man, are able to use improvised weapons to incapacitate the monster, stunned as it was from the poison. They set it on fire, and Gangdu stabs it. The creature dies as Gangdu manages to revive Seju. We next see Gangdu in wintertime. He's living in the snack bar and has adopted Seju. He keeps an eye on the river and makes sure to have a weapon handy. But a sound outdoors turns out to be nothing, so father and son share a meal, while the news reports that the quote-unquote monster attack business earlier that year was a product of misinformation. There are obvious reasons why this movie has resonated with audiences around the world. An uncaring government tries to cover up mistakes made by people in positions of power without concern for how ordinary people will be affected. Will Gangdu and others on the scene when Agent Yellow was released find their lifespan shortened by exposure to the poison? Will other monsters emerge from the river thanks to the illegal formaldehyde dumping? Gangdu's attitude at the end of the film seems to be that he can trust himself and his family, but beyond that, there's no sense in paying attention to official edicts. The most dangerous misinformation is that which is legitimized by a government trying to save face. And as is often the case in movies of this kind, yes, there is a literal monster killing and eating people, but the long-term danger to our heroes comes from fellow humans, who are so often the most dangerous monster of all, when they value convenience more than the well-being of others. I give this movie 3 guns out of 4. Our second film this month is Shin-Godzilla. Released in 2016, this unsettling new take on Godzilla showcases not just the atomic beast's awesome power, but also demonstrates the kind of absurd bureaucracy that would ensue in the event of a real kaiju attack. The film begins with the Japan Coast Guard investigating a yacht in Tokyo Bay. No one's on board, but there's no signs of struggle or violence. Soon after, the tunnel that allows traffic to pass beneath the bay is flooded, with blood of indeterminate origin. Rando Yaguchi, a deputy chief cabinet secretary, sees a video posted online that appears to show some kind of animal is responsible for the chaos in Tokyo Bay. What looks to be a tentacle, or as it turns out, a tail, was caught on camera. Of course, his superiors don't believe him at first, but then the creature appears again, this time on land. As the creature moves on 4 legs through a Tokyo suburb, it causes terrible destruction. Some people aren't able to evacuate in time, and though the creature's big eyes would make it look almost comical if it were smaller, death and destruction follow in its wake. Then, onlookers watch in horror as the creature begins to change. Soon, it's moving on 2 legs instead of 4. But apparently, this reptilian monster can't regulate its body temperature, and it soon goes back into the ocean to cool off. Rando is assigned to lead the team researching the creature. The people he's assigned are largely iconoclasts, a mix of brilliant scientists and government workers who normally might not work well with others, but are determined to save lives and forego the usual bureaucratic way of doing things. Obviously, in a situation like this, it's unwise to stop and have a meeting or hold a press conference every time the creature is sighted. The normal way of doing things isn't working, and decisive action as well as novel ideas are needed. One of the first helpful points of data to come out of the task force is the fact that the creature is radioactive. Since it gets its energy from nuclear fission, that makes it relatively easy to track. The cosmopolitan and knowledgeable U.S. Special Envoy, Kayako Ann Patterson, is able to tell the group about Professor Maki, a zoology professor who studied the effects of radiation on animals. Clearly, he had some idea that a dangerous mutation might spring to life in the waters of Tokyo Bay, but the fact that he predicted the creature's eventual appearance caused him to be ostracized in both American and Japanese scientific communities, which, to be fair, is exactly what would happen in reality, but this is a monster movie, so the person predicting the birth of a mutated aquatic titan turned out to be absolutely correct. Ultimately, the professor disappeared, leaving his research behind on the empty yacht that was found at the start of the film. Professor Maki was the one that came up with the name Godzilla, or Gojira, in the original Japanese, and the next time the creature appears, it is doubled in size. Though the Japan Self-Defense Forces make a valiant effort to stop Godzilla's rampage, it's able to reach downtown Tokyo. where it's wounded by bunker buster bombs. This causes the monster to retaliate, spewing atomic energy blasts from its mouth that destroy parts of the city, as well as killing the Prime Minister and other government officials as they try to evacuate. Its energy spent, Godzilla stills and goes into a kind of hibernation state, and Tokyo burns. Rando's task force recognizes that, given how Godzilla needs cooling periods after attacks, there's a kind of temperature-related weakness here they could exploit. They could create a blood coagulant that would effectively freeze the creature. Meanwhile, though, Godzilla is still evolving, and tests determine that it can reproduce asexually, which means humanity has precious little time to stop the behemoth before more monsters can be born. This news prompts the UN to announce that nuclear weapons will be used if the creature can't be stopped by a deadline that's just days away. At this point, Kayako uses her political acumen and connections to buy a bit more time. Having both American and Japanese roots, she doesn't want nuclear weapons to be detonated in Tokyo. After the team figures out how to decipher Professor Maki's coded research, Rando's group moves to produce the blood coagulant with international assistance. With only hours to spare before the scheduled nuclear strike, the plan to freeze Godzilla goes into effect. And if you know me, you know that I love a good monster freezing plan in movies like this. First, drones are used to distract and anger the creature, and Godzilla once again uses its atomic breath. At this point, trains filled with explosives are sent crashing into the monster's feet and legs, and empty buildings nearby are also blown up. Obviously, this isn't enough to kill the creature, but its open mouth is the real target. Tanker trucks filled with coagulant are used to send the compound into Godzilla's mouth, and gradually, the workers are killed in the process. The plan works, and Godzilla is frozen solid. The film ends with the frozen Godzilla, a part of what's left of the Tokyo skyline. Rando and Kayako acknowledge that if Godzilla ever awakens, the international community will move to strike Tokyo with nuclear weapons. But for now, the creature has been defeated, and the city can begin to rebuild, given that Godzilla's unique nuclear signature has a half-life of just 20 days, so it won't be dangerous for people to return. However, something on Godzilla's tail looks strange. Something humanoid is there, frozen for now. This movie is a great introduction to modern Godzilla films. For all of the creature's 7 decades, it served as a commentary on the pitfalls of the nuclear age, often typified by humanity's hubris. But this film marks the beginning of the Reiwa era, the current age of Godzilla films, which also includes Godzilla -1, the most commercially and critically successful Godzilla film of this century, so far. Shin-Godzilla is a story that explores the terrors that result from government inaction, with the dangers inherent in maintaining the status quo at the expense of human lives. And it's also a great monster movie. I gave Shin-Godzilla 4 bunker busters out of 5. Our book this month is Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives, written by Dan Waters and Ram V, with art by Matthew Roberts and Dave Stewart. This is the second title of the Universal Monsters series from Skyward, an imprint of Image Comics. And while it didn't make quite the splash, that 2023's Dracula series did, this was a worthy sequel to the original Creature from the Black Lagoon trilogy. The original film is, like Godzilla, 70 years old this year, and while the creature hasn't made as many waves, as the King of Kaiju, it's considered the last of the classic Universal horror monsters, and this limited series demonstrates the creature's enduring appeal. The following is an excerpt from my review of this graphic novel. After nearly drowning during an encounter with a serial killer, Kate Marsden has followed her would-be murderer to South America. Deep in the jungle, it's clear that something strange is happening. And despite her editor's misgivings, Kate is a reporter, and she follows a corpse's journey into the wilderness, hoping for a lead. But before Kate can stop her dangerous foe from striking again, she's faced with the fact that there's something else stalking the banks of the Amazon. And it isn't human. Kate's journey will lead her to some surprising questions. Is the creature that resides in the Black Lagoon really a monster at all? Or are the humans seeking it the real threat? And to kill a monster, do you have to become one? The 4 issues that make up this book are a kind of murder mystery thriller colliding with the cryptozoological, and it's effective at demonstrating how the creature is more sinned against than sinning. After all, it never leaves its home in the lagoon by choice. When humans enter its territory, or capture it for study, then it fights back. Of course, the creature does kill, but its reaction to Kate in the last issue of this series is telling. The creature kills out of self-defense, or simply to get rid of the humans that have entered its home. Note that the creature, while it has some intelligence, is more animal-like than not. If you want to compare it to something, maybe it's more like a primate than a fish as far as gray matter is concerned. But then again, members of the octopi family are famously very intelligent. In contrast to the creature, when Kate kills, she relishes the chance to finally end the life of the serial killer who tried to end hers. On the one hand, her attack is brutal, but on the other, readers will probably interpret it as self-defense, or at least as the actions of someone desperate to stop a murder spree from continuing. But the way the creature turns away from Kate and returns to the water makes its thoughts clear without any dialogue. They are not the same. Yes, the creature kills, but it doesn't relish violence. In murdering her foe, Kate has become monstrous in the eyes of what most would consider a monster. In its 70 years, the creature, also known as the Gill Man, has represented many things. Unlike Godzilla, who was created by radiation, the creature is billed as an ancient species that survives only in the deepest depths of the Amazon. Humans did not create this thing, and it doesn't seek out human settlements or smash cities. It seems to simply want to be left alone, the occasional aesthetic attraction to human women notwithstanding. In the first two films, the creature's existence suggests that there are limits to what science knows and what it can glean from observation alone. That's part of the appeal. The creature is a sign that there is still mystery in the world, something uncanny to be discovered. Simultaneously, though, these stories suggest that the creature is better off left alone, far from man's meddling. In the first movie, he kills 3 men, and the group of scientists who travel to the Black Lagoon eventually leave without their prize. In the second, when he's brought back to civilization, the Gill Man goes on a rampage before returning to the sea. And to be fair, in both of these films, he is kidnapped by humans who barged into his home. This book expands on the mythos of the creature, demonstrating that it's intelligent enough to recognize and wish to avoid the excesses of human violence. It's worth noting that perhaps the most famous iteration of the Gill Man isn't an official sequel at all. Rather, in this century, movie fans are better acquainted with the creature from The Shape of Water. In this Oscar-winning film co-written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, both the creature and the protagonist, Elisa, are unable to speak, but they learn to communicate and ultimately fall in love. Now horror director James Wan wants to revive the original Gill Man, and it will be interesting to see what that looks like. After all, in its 70 years of life, everyone from fans online to Marilyn Monroe's character in The 7-Year Itch have recognized that the creature isn't really a villain, or even especially monstrous. Maybe it's just stuck between wishing for companionship and wanting to be left alone. An apex predator that wants to rule the river without human competition. It can't leave its underwater home for long, nor does it want to. There's a reason that so many horror movies are concerned with water. Whether it's oceans, rivers, or a lagoon deep in the jungle. When we can't see what's under the surface of a body of water, our imaginations tend to fill in the blanks. To quote Kate Kirshner of HowStuffWorks.com, the ocean takes up about 71% of Earth's space, yet a whopping 95% of that ocean is completely unexplored. By the way, this article is quick to clarify that humans have mapped the ocean floor in its entirety, but the resolution of these maps is to 3 miles, which means that we have more detailed maps of Mars. Of course humans are fascinated by water. Without it, we die. Now, too much water can be deadly too. We're made of the stuff, and so are some of our worst nightmares. So, on your next vacation, your next trip to the pool, or the next time you're driving by the river, be careful. You never know what lies beneath. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another terrifying trio.